I thought I'd get right into this one. It's not really a sensitive topic, although some of you are holding on tight to some alternative idea about the nature of our planet. At this point, I would assume most of you have heard of the tales of Admiral Richard Byrd and his adventures to the North and South Poles, so there is no need for me to get into that here. I just want to talk about possibilities and realities of this planet we call Earth. And I want to explore gaining a better understanding of what is actually inside the Earth. So what we have here is a photo of a jungle in Vietnam. Now at first glance, nothing seems out of the ordinary until you look a bit closer into the background, where you can see the interior walls of a cave. How many of you have heard of Hang Son Doong? I believe this is currently the world's largest cave on record, and this shot was taken about a quarter mile below the Earth's surface, in a cave that is over 5 miles long and almost 500 feet deep. It has a flowing river, a jungle, and wildlife. Now, this may not be exactly what people are talking about when it comes to the discussion of a hollow Earth, but I just want to give you a realistic image of what could exist just below the Earth's surface. And if the hollow Earth does exist, then this is probably what we are dealing with. A massive cave, or a system of caves, as we are talking about a pretty big planet. Everything on the surface of the planet can fit inside the planet, with room left over for oceans, a sky, and you could still have a mantle and core beneath that. Looking at a place like Hang Son Doong, it makes you wonder, what other worlds exist in the uncharted? For starters, let's be very clear about something. The idea that the Earth has a molten inner core, outer core, mantle, and crust, that is just an idea, a theory. Some theorize the core to be solid, others suggest that there is no inner core at all. I would say that there is a very, very small group of individuals who have a very good idea of what's down there. So far, this planet, like many others, has proven to be quite impenetrable. This is a tough place. Even a meteor traveling thousands of miles per hour is not powerful enough to bust through the crust. Cosmic radiation struggles to get through. Now, it takes an extremely intelligent team of people to figure out what is inside the Earth by using numbers alone. Using anything short of seismic waves, and you're going to have a very hard time analyzing anything past the crust. I want to explain this because right now we are just looking at the possibility that the Earth is not solids and liquids all the way to the core, but may have a hollow interior. Now, this may not resonate with those of you who support the idea of the Earth being something else entirely. But regardless of where you stand, I believe absorbing this information and carrying it with you will give you a better understanding when the topic arises again. I'm not here to propagate the hollow Earth, just here to show you some interesting things that you can go look into further if you desire. So let's get into how this works. When there is an earthquake, there are two types of waves that go out in all directions throughout the entire planet. P and S waves. Now, many people think that magma comes all the way up from the core of the Earth to the surface through a volcano. And this is the image that has been ingrained in most people's minds, and I'm telling you, you start talking about that idea to those geologists and seismologists and they will laugh at you. And then they will tell you that magma probably comes from within the crust due to the pressure and heat. See, no one has been below the crust, so no one can definitely say what is beneath it. I've heard theories the thickness of the crust to be no more than 20 miles. I've heard 25 miles. I've heard up to 43 miles. They don't know, and of course, it varies from the deepest ocean to the highest mountain. Now, when seismic waves travel through matter, if the material is very dense, the waves will be reflected or refracted. If it is a material of low density, then the waves tend to travel in a less restrictive, straighter path. If the Earth were solid all the way through, and if the density increased as those waves traveled deeper, then you would get a lot of bounce back of some of those waves back up to the surface. Now, if the Earth were hollow, or if the Earth's density increased as the waves traveled down through the crust and then started to decrease as they approached the core, then you would still get those waves to the other side of the planet that are not in straight lines. Here's what's interesting. From the center of an earthquake out to about 7,000 miles or so, you have an abundance of seismic waves. Then you have what's called the shadow zone, where there are very few seismic waves getting through. And as you get to the other side of the planet, the amount of seismic waves increases again. Okay? If you know where the epicenter of an earthquake is and you know where the shadow zone starts, then you could draw a straight line through the Earth back to the epicenter to give you an idea where the density inside the Earth starts to change. And if you have a 7,000 mile stretch from the earthquake to the shadow zone, you need a very, very thick crust along with that thick mantle. Keep in mind, this is another calculated theory, okay? So get this. There are P and S waves, pressure waves or sound waves, and then shear waves. The P waves travel through anything short of a vacuum. S waves can travel only through rigid bodies such as solid rock. Now, if the Earth increases in density as you go deeper, and if it has this solid iron and nickel core, then both of those waves should travel straight through the center of the Earth to the other side and increase in speed as they approach the center. Because high density increases the speed of the P waves, but they don't do that. The P waves actually slow down when they hit the outer core on their way to the other side of the Earth, and the S waves get blocked by something when they hit the outer core, or should I say, get blocked by nothing. And they are still working on this theory about the iron core because there are several things they have to take educated guesses at to make that work. Now they will say, well, the P waves slow down once they hit the outer core, but they speed up again once they hit the inner core. That still doesn't explain the gap between the outer and inner core, now does it? Actually, that explanation sounds more like Agartha than anything. That makes it sound like there is a floating rock in the center of the Earth. Oh, no, the outer core is liquid. Is it, really? You see, there are certain P waves that travel straight through the inner core to the other side of the planet. Those waves are supposed to travel in straight lines, but they don't. They get refracted as if they were traveling around the inner core. Because when they reach the other side of the Earth, they cross paths. It is a bit confusing, but that is how they lay out seismic wave patterns of those waves traveling through the Earth. You see, folks, you don't have to take anyone's word for it. You can look at the data yourself. These scientists publish it. But they are not trying to explain a hollow Earth. They are trying to explain why the Earth is the way they theorize it to be. Now, I know what you're thinking. If the Earth did in fact have a hollow core, then what's the big deal? Why wouldn't they just say that and let everyone move on with their lives? Well, one reason for sticking with their story is to continue to push a certain narrative that has taken quite some time to develop. Because no one, without the permission and assistance of a powerful government, would be able to find out what's down there on their own. There's no way. So they, of course, are going to keep on singing that same song. Now, attached to the hollow earth theory is the possibility of there being holes at the poles. And with all the expeditions to the North Pole, even with Admiral Byrd, we've got nothing but stories. But what's interesting is that some stories go back centuries. Agartha, Hyperborea, Shambhala, some of these subterranean civilizations are mentioned in Vedic texts as well. We don't have to get into all that here. When it comes to holes at the poles, here is something that I want you to all consider or ponder, if you will. Right now, there is a group of individuals that are on the side of the earth not being round, or a globe, right? Why do you think that is happening now? Because it is a time of revelation. This movement, let me tell you, has caused people on both sides to up their science game. I mean, you want to debate a flat earther, you gotta go look some stuff up, and so do they. But let me entertain both sides with an idea. What if I told you that both sides are right? What if I said the earth is both round and flat? And even more than that, is hollow at the same time. Crazy, right? Let me give you something to imagine. Imagine you are at the equator, and there, the earth is quite round and lush, very green, full of life, okay? The relationship of the equator and the sun are great for life to thrive there. Now move north, let's say up to the northern regions of Canada, Siberia, Alaska. Now the land, at that point, begins to flatten out. And that entire area at the north and south poles are leveled out flat. Are you with me so far? Now imagine you move closer to the poles, and as you move closer, the land begins to dip down. So now you are entering into something like a massive crater or basin. For the North Pole, this basin is filled with water, known as the Arctic Ocean. At the South Pole, this basin is capped with ice, Antarctica. Let me tell you something I discovered that I thought was interesting. The size of Antarctica, well, let me tell you what you will see when you Google this. The size of Antarctica is 5.405 million square miles, okay? Guess what the size of the Arctic Ocean up at the North Pole is? 5.427 million miles squared. They are both 5.4 million square miles, folks. Do you realize that Antarctica is almost the exact same size as the Arctic Ocean? Now, should we question this? It's just a coincidence. It means nothing, right? I think the shape of the magnetosphere and the shape of the atmospheric layers can give you a better idea of the shape of the Earth. Overall, at a distance, the Earth is going to look spherical. And you can't see the Earth close up because, well, then it's too big from our perspective, if that makes any sense. So this is what we are dealing with. Let's take it a step further. There are stories of an inner sun. Well, if the Earth was hollow with holes at the poles, you have the magnetosphere directing the sun's radiation into the Earth. If those particles were to get trapped there, then the accumulation of particles could make up the inner sun in theory. If that inner sun could sustain life, then you could have a concave Earth on the inside of the planet. But that would mean that gravity forces would have to originate in the crust. After all, magma is radioactive and magnetically charged, and there is a lot of it. So let's look at something else here. If you go reading into the old stories of Hollow Earth, and there are a lot of them, you will be able to pick out similarities in these stories, not only about the location of the entrance, but the life forms described. The vegetation and wildlife is almost always described as being prehistoric. Evergreen foliage, giant fruit because there is always illumination, and almost every time they throw giants into the story. And I get it. The environment, I imagine, would be quite different given the different atmosphere, the air pressure. And I'm sure that the conditions of the Hollow Earth would be much more stable, but like us, that world would have to be directly affected by the activity of the sun and the cosmos. Think about this. If we are getting all this extra radiation coming in from the cosmic rays and the sun, building up inside the Earth, I'm pretty sure that would affect all life in the Hollow Earth as well. And could conditions there change so much as to drive out those life forms onto the surface world? It's funny because most people would expect the aliens to come from outer space. And these beings don't have to come from the center of the earth, because there is the hollow earth, which is just a theory or legend. And then you have these caves, these caverns, which we know to be very real. And we don't know about all of them or how large they are. You know, if you are in a massive cave where the ceiling of the cave is so high that you can't see it, then that is just going to look like the sky to you, especially since the gases down there would accumulate around the ceiling, giving you cloud cover. Besides, many of the old tales of a hollow earth are really descriptions of a subterranean civilization, and those beings are visiting this world. You hear stories of an inner hollow earth based on explorers who traveled there. Those stories are all a bit different because of the variations in cultures and languages, and some of them, when you read them, seem very real. If any of these civilizations existed or exist, then I am sure due to the changes occurring within and around the earth, soon we will find out what's what. And certain people will know first, and that is when you will see them trying to set us up for it to happen. You know, the way the individuals in the know and control do things, it's quite telling. How many of you have seen the image of the black hole sun officially released recently, taken from the Event Horizon Telescope? The first words that came out of my mouth were, "You gotta be freaking kidding me." And they couldn't even be creative enough to show you the picture upside down, so that it doesn't look like every other artist's rendition of the black hole ever. What am I really looking at here? Is that Nibiru with the wings curving up and around? Look, they said they were going to try and get this picture back in 2015. They had a computer rendering of it back then, and lo and behold, they get a snapshot. Smile. I'm not impressed, nor convinced, really. Actually, it's starting to get pretty annoying with all this stuff the space agency keeps throwing at us. I mean, they are constantly and consistently feeding us photos and press conferences. Oh, look, there's an asteroid over there. Look, there's a black hole over there. Look, there's an exploding star over here. Look, the sun. No, look, at the space launch. No, look at this observatory shut down. No, look over here at Mars. No, look over here at the moon. Folks, it looks like we have our own real-life Star Trek series going on right now. And it's actually more interesting because the alien part is still mysterious. Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize they just showed you a picture of a black hole? Doesn't matter at all if the picture is real or not. It's the fact they presented it to you as such. And to be perfectly honest, I find it somewhat ominous given the destructive nature of a black hole. And in the words of George Nada, I don't like this one bit. Not one bit. Now, when it comes to the hollow earth, there are a few other things you may want to consider, such as the theory that the moon and other planets in our solar system are hollow as well. Would this explain astronauts describing the moon ringing like a bell whenever hit by a sizable object? Or in the case of Apollo 12, dropping the ascent stage, to what? Blow something up? Because I'm sure they had enough seismic data from all the meteors that constantly touch down on the surface. We should consider also the ocean discovered beneath the Atlantic. Along with that, we may want to also consider the forming of the Earth, as some would suggest that the Earth started off small and dense, completely covered with water, then over time it expanded and separated the continents to the positions they are in today, allowing the water to fill in those recessive areas on the crust. Now, this theory would suggest that the land is older than the sea, and it is. They've determined the land we walk on to be much older than the seabed. I mean, we find seashells in high elevations. What does that tell you? At the end of the day, these governments have all the money. They have the power to close off sections of our planet. I mean, here in the United States alone, there are dozens of places that are off limits to the public. In some of these places, you will be paying off fines for the rest of your life if you are caught there. Or maybe you go missing. I'm not kidding. But I imagine things will be revealed to us that is not by their choice. You know, there are prophecies of us seeing things we have never seen before. That includes beings other than human. Where will they come from? So we will see. And as the fogs and mist builds up around us, literally, I'm sure people are going to be witnessing some very strange phenomena indeed. Does Hollow Earth exist? Maybe, maybe not. Will we ever find out? Maybe, maybe not.